Okay, sisters, inshallah, let's get started. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. You guys can hear me okay, right? My voice is coming through fine? Yeah, okay, Alhamdulillah. I hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to the class. As I was saying last week, inshallah, we will end this class next week. So I think we will be able to finish the material, the entire discussion about tahara. We're coming to the end now. We just have some discussions about mutahhirat and maybe some things about najasa that I didn't mention yet. But in particular, the remaining mutahhirat. So we started talking about water being the main mutahhir, the main thing that purifies najis things. Okay? So we'll continue that today. We'll finish it up. We'll start moving on to other things like earth and sun and see when does that make things tahir. And then this discussion of mutahhirat will finish next week. If there's time, maybe we'll touch on one or two other things. Otherwise, even if we don't, that's the main discussion about tahara. So we will wrap things up next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, sisters who are just joining us, Marzia, Fatima, and Ma'asuma. Okay, before we go back to mutahhirat and water, I wanted to add some more things about water, like I said, before we move on. I think that there were some discussions about najasa itself that I didn't mention yet. So I'm going to start with that. And then I have a couple of questions, inshallah, just to get your minds thinking about things. And then we'll move on to mutahhirat again. So first of all, when it comes to najasa, one important thing to know is how does najasa spread in the first place? I think I may have mentioned this, but I'm not sure. The idea is that two things must touch each other and there must be moisture. Okay, if my hand is dry and if a dog is dry, even if I touch the dog, nothing's going to happen in terms of najasa. Okay, my hand is not going to be najis. What needs to be the case is there needs to be moisture and enough moisture that it somehow transfers from the dog's body to my hand or vice versa. If that happens, then my hand now becomes najis. That clear, inshallah? Another thing is that when we talk about, one of the things we had said is that if you drop just even a tiny amount of najasa in a liquid other than water, or even water that is qaleel water, as opposed to kur, as opposed to a river, there were other types of water aside from qaleel, that entire liquid is going to become najis right away. Okay? So now over here, there's a further clarification that's kind of interesting that's there in the books of Ahkam. Just one second, I'm going to drink some water. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick right now. So one of the things is that this rule that I just mentioned, where you drop a little bit of najasa and the entire liquid becomes najis, that applies to normal liquids. But if it's a little bit thick, okay, for example, butter or cream, it doesn't apply. Just the part which gets najis, where let's say you drop some blood on butter or on cream. The books of Ahkam go into so much detail. They say that the criteria is this, that if you were to like take a spoon and take out a part of that butter, if it doesn't right away fill up, okay, then it's not like a liquid where the entire thing becomes najis. Normally butter, cream is thick, right? That's not the case. So you don't need to worry about it. Just the part where which touched the blood is going to be najis. You can somehow scrape off that part of the butter or the cream, or let's say it's a fruit. Let's say it's a very kind of wet fruit. Same thing. As long as it's not a flowing liquid, where that if like normally a glass of water or like a juice or something, if you take a spoonful away from it, right away the part where the spoon was will be filled again, right? In that case, the whole thing becomes najis. That makes sense? Okay. Another thing is that the idea of najasa spreading, we said that there's two different things. There's something that is aynun najis, intrinsically najis, those 11 things that we mentioned. By the way, I sent the notes, inshallah. All you sisters got the notes, the discussions we did about najasa. That was lesson 7 and 8, or 8 or 9. 8 and 9 of the notes, but I think in our sessions it was session 7 and 8, approximately. I sent the notes about that. So those 11 things that we discussed, those are aynun najis. Urine, feces, blood, mita, and so on. Everything else, like your clothes or your skin or the door, if it becomes najis, it's called mutanajjis. Okay, meaning that it's not intrinsically najis. Now, Maraja' say that there is a limitation in how many times a mutanajjis can spread najasa. Okay, so let me give you an example. If this is exactly, I'm reading it from the book of Ayatollah Sistani. Okay, let's say somebody's right hand touched urine. Okay, so now your right hand is mutanajjis. And then your right hand touches your left hand. Okay, and then your left hand touches some clothes. Now we've reached three levels of mutanajjis. First, your right hand was mutanajjis, and it spread najasa to your left hand. Your left hand spread najasa to a piece of clothes, an article of clothes. Here, Ayatollah Sistani says at this point, it doesn't go any further. Okay, the maximum is three. I'm just gonna double check. As I was writing this notes, what I understood was that Imam Khomeini's opinion was a little bit stricter, and he said four. Okay. There's an example somewhere in the book that we have. I don't find it right now, inshallah, I'll get it later. Yeah, it's there in the end of lesson, the lesson that I sent you guys, in fact, the second one about the najasat. It's there exactly. Okay, where he says the fourth intermediary doesn't come. I think it's correct. What I've written here on the slides is that Ayatollah Sistani says three only, and Imam Khomeini says four. Whatever, it's not something too practical, too relevant. It's just something kind of cool to know that, there is a limit. Mutanajjis things don't forever pass on najasa. Eventually, you reach a level where that thing is considered najis. The clothing in the example I gave you of the right hand, the left hand, and then the clothing. That clothing is najis, but it doesn't spread najasa to something else. Okay? One last thing about najasa that, overall, we talked about a similar concept when we talked about how do we determine who is the a'lam marja'. Okay, overall, there is a discussion in fiqh that uh, when you want to identify a subject, so this is different from the ruling. Okay, the fatwa, for example, is that you can't pray with najis clothes. But here, how do we identify that some certain clothes are najis? Overall, in the Sharia, we always have two ways to kind of identify something. One is that you have knowledge, you have certainty, basically. You're convinced that it's najis. Another way is what's called a bayyina. If two people, two just people come and tell you that this thing became najis, then you have to treat it like it's najis, even if you're not convinced. In these examples, it's not that maybe again practical because even one person telling you would give you that knowledge. You'd probably trust them. However, if for some reason you were not convinced, if two people who are trustworthy tell you, you have to act on that. And that's what's called in the Sharia, that is called a bayyina. Bayyina meaning two people inform you. Here, the books of Ahkam, they add a third situation as well, in this case of Najasa, that if the owner of the item, the person who was kind of in charge of it, who was using it, if they tell you that it became najis, again, you have to act on that, even if you're not convinced. Okay, so over here, for determining something has become najasa, now in the Ahkam, we have three different ways. The main way, which is what normally applies, is our own knowledge that it became najis. The second way, which is a general thing in the Sharia, is two just people come and bear witness that, okay, this became najis. The last is that the dhul yad, the person who kind of was in charge of it. Yeah, ikhbaru dhil yad is the Arabic term. If the person whose hand was on that, person who was kind of in charge of it, the owner or the user, the renter, whoever kind of was in charge of it, they can just inform you, and that's going to be enough. Okay, any questions? Make sense, inshallah? Another couple of rules about najasa before we do something else, inshallah, is why do we need najasa? Some of the ahkam of najasa. Okay, first of all, the main thing, of course, that we always think of is that najasa, tahara, is something we need to worry about for prayer, with certain details that if we later go on to discuss the ahkam of prayer, we will go into those details. But generally, your clothing and your body, and even where you prostrate, where you put your forehead down, cannot be najis. They have to be tahir. That's the main thing that comes to mind. Interesting thing for you to know, probably your sisters know this, is that tawaf, the wajib tawaf, has these same conditions as well, where it's just like prayer. You need to be in the state of wudu, you need to be tahir. So for your hajj or umrah, if you've entered in the state of ihram, even that umrah has like a wajib tawaf, then definitely that also has this condition. Aside from prayer and tawaf, there are some other ahkam in the sharia to do with najasa. I'm just going to quickly list them off. They're not our topic of discussion, so we don't need to go into detail. But there is this whole discussion about buying and selling. And one of the kind of forbidden transactions that Maraja talk about is the idea of buying and selling najis things. Can you sell, I don't know, the carcass of a dead animal? Can you sell alcohol? Is that going to be a valid transaction to do that? It's a point of discussion. Maraja have different opinions. From what I remember, Ayatollah Khamenei, for example, he's pretty lenient on a lot of these things. He says if there is a halal usage for that, you are allowed to sell it for that. You know, like somebody, maybe you want to sell najis meat for a zoo to feed their animals or something. As long as there's some kind of logical purpose, the transaction is going to be valid. But regardless, I'm just telling you that these are discussions that the Marajah have to do with najasa. Of course, one thing I mentioned, anything that is najis is going to be haram to eat. The opposite is not true. Everything tahir is not necessarily halal, but everything najis is definitely going to be haram to eat. One last ruling about najasa, which again is interesting. We do have masajid in Canada as well, so you may come across it. First of all, it's haram to make a masjid najis. Okay, it's carpet, it's wall, I don't know, like things associated, even the door, the window of the masjid, to intentionally make it najis is haram. Not just that, but if it becomes najis, you need to make it tahir. It's wajib to make it tahir, and it's wajib to rush to right away make it tahir. If it's prayer time, as long as your prayer is not becoming qada, you're not supposed to pray. If you do pray, your prayer is valid, but you have committed a sin. You're not supposed to pray, you're supposed to rush to first make the masjid tahir. Okay? Other things like the mushaf, the Quran, the harams of the Ahlul Bayt, the turba of Imam Hussein, they also have similar rulings, but that's just like a general ruling of not disrespecting something that is sacred in Islam. Based on what it looks like from my limited reading, the thing about the masjid is like a very clear ruling in the Sharia that you're not allowed to make the masjid najis, and if it becomes najis, you have to make it tahir right away. The other things are kind of like grouped under an overall discussion of disrespecting a sacred thing in Islam is haram. Therefore, to make the Quran najis is also haram because you are disrespecting something very sacred in Islam. Okay. Yeah, please, again, at any time, if you sisters have any comments, questions, I would be happy to hear from you. And even if you're able to turn on your cameras, please do that. I thought we would start off with some questions before we go back to mutahirat. Just a recap, inshallah, reminder, فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى. These ahkam are tricky. If you don't keep reminding yourself and thinking about them, it's easy to forget. So I want to ask, inshallah, first of all, we talked about how the mita, the dead carcass that's not been done dhabiha of, okay? The dead carcass of certain animals are tahir and certain animals are going to be najis. Can anybody remind me what was that criteria? And then we could try to apply that criteria to these animals that I put here, a chicken, a duck, a mouse, an eel. I think that's how you say it, right? Eel, it's like a sheep, a female sheep, a snake, fish, cockroach, and lizard. Anybody? Just can feel free to write in the chat if you're more comfortable doing that. Simple rule. Come on, I'm sure you sisters remember. Some of you at least. What kind of animals are going to be tahir versus which ones are going to be najis? The mita again. Ahsan. Thank you, Sister Asiya Kazmi. The ones that have gushing blood. Okay. Nafas sa'il was the Arabic. Nafas here means blood, basically. Sa'il means flowing. In Persian, they say khune jahandedar. Those animals that have gushing blood are gonna be najis. So we could try to apply that. As far as I know, I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. The first four are gonna be gushing blood. The second four are all gonna be kind of reptiles, fish. Those are not gonna be gushing blood. So even their dead body, you kill a cockroach. Okay, this is common in Iran. If you come to Iran, we have lots of cockroaches. I don't know, there's a fish that was just kind of it wasn't caught to be eaten. Okay, the way a fish becomes halal is if it doesn't even have to be a Muslim. Even a non-Muslim, if they pick a fish up out of the water, they catch a fish and it's alive when it comes out of the water, that fish is going to be halal. But let's say it died in the water, or let's say nobody kind of took it, it was just kind of, I don't know, thrown onto the land. In that case, that fish would not be halal. And in that case, it's still tahir. You can't eat it, but it's tahir. Okay? A snake, similarly. Fish, there's one more condition about scales. That's not our discussion right now. Anyways, okay. Second question. We talked about how one of the examples of also one of the discussions related to this whole mita discussion of a dead animal was a dead body part. God forbid if body part of somebody is amputated, is cut off, a living kind of piece of flesh is cut off, it has the same ahkam as a mita. However, what's the deal if you're just scratching your skin? Let's say like it's really itchy and you're scratching part of your skin. Is the dead skin cells or the, I don't know, dead part of your lip that you peeled off, is that gonna be najis or not? What do you sisters think? Yeah, it's not gonna be. Okay, if it was dead, if it was somehow ready to come off and it was dead, then it's not gonna be najis. If you do peel like painfully peel off part of your lip that is like alive and is hurting you, then that would be najis. Okay. I had something about that somewhere here, but it's okay. I'm pretty sure that that was the ruling.
Sorry, could you please repeat the last thing you said about the peeling of the lip?
Mm. Okay, okay. You know what? If you allow me, I'm just gonna look for it. I have it somewhere here. I want to just be sure I'm reading it correctly. But it's the idea that if it was a living part of your body that you somehow like like living skin that you peeled off, then that would have the ahkam of it would be najis basically, yeah. Okay. Here, I'm reading something from Ayatollah Khamenei. I don't think it would be specific to Ayatollah Khamenei, but I'm reading it from his book. it says like a small amount of skin from your lip or other parts of your body that are in the state of like coming off, meaning they're like, dying, dead. Those are gonna be tahir. But then it says, look, if there is a part of your skin that is not ready to kind of fall off, but you peel it off based on ihtiyat wajib, it's gonna be najis. Okay, but the part that you peeled it off from is still gonna be tahir. So let's say you peel off like a piece of skin, your face, if you take it from your face, or your lip, if you take it from your lip, that's still gonna be tahir. But that piece of skin that was still alive, it was like painful, you did it, hurt yourself. That's now gonna be based on ihtiyat wajib according to Ayatollah Khamenei, najis. Okay, I'd have to check Ayatollah Sistani, but I thought that it was najis for everybody. Yes, Sister Hannah.
Sorry, so what about like when you're like cutting your nails or something and the skin on your fingernails that is not peeling off, but you somehow peel that out? Is that also considered the same
Yeah,
ruling?
I think so. So you just need to be careful that that piece that you took off is now najis.
Thank you.
Not that you would touch it, right? So it's just yeah. Statica.
Sorry,
Do you
I have a question that goes back to the intermediaries.
Mhm.
Um, sorry, it might be silly, but for example, if you're wearing shoes in public, and let's say you go to a public bathroom and maybe there's something najis on the floor that you step on. I know based on the basis of the intermediaries, does it apply that if, for example, I take 3 steps, then it's not najis? It can't, like my shoes can't make anything more najis.
No, the three steps was not any. This was about like three different things becoming najis. But in your question, you don't know for sure that your shoes even became najis, right? So you don't need to worry about it. It's only if you're sure that your shoes became najis, then now if your one shoe touches something else, that touches something else, then that third thing is not going to make anything else najis after that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yes, Sister Hannah?
I just in regards to the shoe thing, I meant to ask, um, let's say we do know for sure that we've stepped in something najis somewhere. Would us like walking around with those shoes, like, because I know there are some rulings. I think today is the lesson probably on the other things that make stuff tahir, but I was just wondering, like, let's say if you walk around with those shoes for a long time on like outside, it's dusty, it's sandy, I don't know, um, and then I come back home, would that still be najis, or would I have to
Mhm.
make sure that, sorry?
Inshallah, we're going to come to that today. I think
Okay,
there's some differences, but yeah, one of the ways that your shoes or the bottom of your feet can become tahir is by walking over earth.
okay,
It doesn't apply to like cement or other things. It has to be like sand or earth proper. Okay.
okay.
Okay. Question three. Let's say you go to a Muslim country, a Muslim bazaar. Okay, Muslim country basically, and you see leather. Now, you're in a Muslim country, but there's a high chance that they got this from a European country or from somewhere else. Do you need to worry about that? Can you treat it as if it is tahir? What do you guys think? Any guesses before I tell you the answer? Yes, yeah, the answer is yes. Okay, so we have this general principle that what we get from the hand of a Muslim or even the suqul Muslimin or basically a land as well of a Muslim, the Muslims. Suqul Muslimin is like, the marketplace of the Muslims. You can treat it as if it's tahir and even halal. Okay, as long as there's like a good reason to do that. It's almost like the other way around, sorry, that um one second, let me just yeah. As long as you're not sure that there's anything wrong here, you can treat it as if it's halal and tahir. Okay. Ayatollah Sistani has a point here that it should be something that is being sold um, in a way that it's for something that requires tahara. Okay, so I mean, like if it's food for sure, as long as you're getting it from Muslims, you can assume it's halal. If it's even clothing, you can again assume it's going to be tahir. Okay, so again, Ayatollah Sistani says something like this that you can assume it's tahir and halal on the condition that the Muslim is somehow dealing with it, the Muslim who's selling it to you is somehow dealing it with it in a way that would require it to be halal or tahir. For example, this is not, what I'd earlier said as an example of like selling something for, I don't know, animals to eat. Okay, if it's meat that's for like an animal to eat, obviously nobody's gonna care if it's tahir or najis, right? That's the kind of point being made here. Generally, anyways, that's kind of unimportant condition. Generally, the overall ruling is that if you take something from Muslims, even the bazaar of the Muslims or the hand of a Muslim, you don't need to ask questions. Okay, you don't even need to, like I talked about earlier about najasa, you have to be certain that something has become najas. Over here, even if you're not certain, it's okay. Even if you doubt, you go to a Muslim and you know that a lot of Muslims are not particular about halal meat, it's okay. As long as you're getting meat from a Muslim, or in our question at hand about bags and shoes and stuff, you're getting these from a Muslim, you don't need to worry about it. Okay. Last one. This is an important thing about the idea of telling somebody that what they're doing is wrong. Irshad al-jahil would be the term. That somebody is making a mistake in some of the ahkam. Do you need to go and correct them or not? What do you guys think? You see somebody eating food that's not halal. You see somebody praying with najis clothing. Are you supposed to go and tell them? Do you have a responsibility to go and tell them anything? Yeah, again, Sister Masuma, thank you. It's not a requirement in the condition. Okay, there's something that needs to be clarified, though, first of all. There's one time where somebody doesn't know the ahkam. They haven't learned the rulings properly. Here, you are supposed to go tell them. Okay? There's another time where no, they know the ahkam, there's just made a mistake in identifying. Like for example, they don't know that these potato chips that they're eating have some haram ingredient in them. If you ask them that are you allowed to eat, I don't know, food that's not animal animal kind of products that are not slaughtered according to Islam. Of course, they know that, right? They just made a mistake in identifying this specific potato chips that they're eating right now. In that situation, you don't have any responsibility. You don't need to go tell them. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier about there's one time we're talking about the Islamic ruling. There's one time we're talking about a specific subject that is this an instance of that ruling or not? I mentioned it earlier about najasa. Now here I'm making the point about haram food, but it's this idea of in Arabic we would say the hukum versus the mawdu'. There's one time where somebody doesn't know the hukum. They haven't learned the laws. They haven't learned that, haram animals cannot be eaten. Okay, there obviously you need to go and teach them, or they don't know that you have to pray with tahir clothing. Here, no, you have a responsibility to go and tell them. But if they know the ruling and they just didn't realize that, oh, there's some blood on their shirt, you don't have any responsibility to go and tell them anything. Yeah, Sister Hannah, that's a good question. How would you determine that they don't know the ahkam? I'll get back to you, inshallah, about it. I did have other questions I was supposed to get back to you about that I never did, but I'll look into this one. I'm guessing it's this that like you have to worry about your own responsibility, and if you're not sure you have any responsibility, you probably don't have to do anything. Okay, so that it would come to be an issue when you know that they don't know the ruling, and then you should go and teach them it basically. Okay. Okay, these were some questions. Inshallah, let's go back now. I didn't prepare the slides properly for what remains. I just put pictures and kind of titles. So I'm gonna walk you guys through some things. I put a picture of a baby because one interesting point about making najis things tahir is that a baby that is exclusively breastfed, okay, so like really, really young baby, there's a specific ruling for making their, at least Ayatollah Sistani has this. I should double check Ayatollah Khamenei if anybody wants, but I'm looking at Ayatollah Sistani's right now. He says that for clothing or like a carpet or something that has been made najis by the urine of a baby that is exclusively breastfed, it's really easy. You just kind of put a little bit of water on it and it becomes tahir. Okay? So you don't need to squeeze it the way you would with other clothing. You don't need to wash it twice the way you would need to with normally when urine makes something najis. Here, even with qalil water, you just kind of put some qalil water on it and I don't know, mop up that water without making having to like really squeeze it out even, and that's fine. Because it's just kind of easier ruling. Okay. Some things remained apparently that I think we didn't talk about. Maybe we did, but I'll just kind of reiterate some things. So we talked about uh, dishes. The Arabic word is aniyah or awani. The Farsi word is zarf, like a cup, a bowl, a jug, a plate. Can anybody remind me how do we make these tahir? What's the different ruling with them? As opposed to like clothing and other things, it was a little bit more difficult to make these dishes tahir. I'll give you guys a few seconds if anybody remembers, otherwise, I'll tell you. Basically, no problem. Basically, the ruling was that with qalil water, you need to wash it 3 times. There are some weird exceptions, like a dog licking the dish or a pig, or if it was used for alcohol. Let's leave those aside. Normally, when a dish becomes najis, if it's with qalil water, you gotta wash it 3 times, whereas if it's with kur water, just 1 time. Okay? How do we do that? Again, just to clarify, there's one of two ways. With qalil water, you could submerge the whole thing in qalil water. Like you could pour water, qalil water on that dish to fill the entire thing. Or you could even just put a little bit of water and kind of swirl it around such that the water reached everywhere and then you empty it out and that's one wash. And so you need to do that 3 times. Okay, so this was the only thing I think that we had as 3 times. For non-dishes, if you remember, it was generally just 1 time. The only exception was something that had become najis with urine, and then you were washing it with qalil water. There you have to wash it 2 times. Okay? Okay. That's one thing. One last discussion, or um, yeah, two last discussions about making the floor tahir and then making certain things that absorb water tahir. Okay, or you can't make it tahir is what we're gonna say. But first of all, with regards to the floor, it's all of these things are very easy with kathir, with core water, right? Like no matter what kind of floor you're talking about, even if it was like sandy floor or like rocks that somehow absorb water in them, if it's become najis and you're just using like core water, so you're using a hose to make it tahir, as soon as you put the hose water on it, it would all become tahir. And that leftover water even is tahir as well, right? So that's clear. The problem is when you're using qalil water, we have two types of flooring that we can imagine. One is smooth flooring where the water kind of flows over it. This one we can make it tahir with qalil water. We just need to make sure that we kind of push the water into a drain. Or as I was saying last week to you sisters, we use a mop or we use like a sponge or a towel. We pour the qalil water on the najis area and then we mop it up. And that would become tahir. Okay? But If it's like I was just giving you an example of like some kind of rocky, sandy terrain where there's najasa and it's not something where the water flows over that land. With qalil water, you can't make this tahir. It's just kind of something to keep in mind. Inshallah, it's not very relevant. I don't know if it would be any kind of like maybe your backyard, maybe sometimes this might apply. If your backyard becomes najis, if it's this kind of flooring where the water doesn't just flow over the land, it kind of goes into the sand and the rocks. As soon as you put qalil water on it, that qalil water is going to remain there. And it's that term I mentioned last week, ghusala, where it's now somehow mixed with the najasa. It's what you are using to make tahir. That qalil water is now najis. So basically, you can't make that kind of flooring tahir with qalil water. Okay? Is that clear? I'm going to pause here. Everybody understood what I just said? Inshallah. Yes, Sister Hannah?
So sorry, just a quick question on that ghusala term. I was wondering, I just wanted to clarify when it comes to like core water when it's like from a hose or from a pipe or something. Is that still consider like is that water that falls off of what you're making pak? Is that water still najis or is that only for qalil water?
No, no. So only with qalil water is it a problem. With
Okay.
cool water, as long as it doesn't have like the color, smell, or taste of the najasa, it's going to be tahir.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, so
Thank you.
that's why exactly in this example of like rocky terrain, you can make it tahir with a hose because, if you've removed the blood or whatever was there, the leftover water is not going to have the properties of the najasa. So it's ghusala of core water basically. And so it's going
What
to
if
be
what if um is this also the same situation where let's say I have a wound and I'm washing it under the tap and it like is splashing around it, but it still doesn't have like the colors or properties like that water that's splashing off of the wound. Like it's kind of just
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
then
yeah. That'd be
okay.
exactly it. That'd be
Thank
fine.
you.
No problem. Okay. The last thing is that one thing that Maraja kind of presented like this, that there are different substances we could talk about that we want to make tahir. A lot of what we're normally talking about, like clothing and I don't know, actually clothing is different, but okay, there's one thing like hard substances, like your skin or a book or something like that. That you just the water kind of passes over it and you've made it tahir, right? Once, or if it was urine and qalil water twice. That's one type of thing. There's another type of thing that you can actually squeeze the water out of. It goes in and it remains water and it like, the water has gone into the clothing or the carpet. Here you need to, especially with qalil water, you need to squeeze it out so that ghusala comes out. But there is another example of something that like when the water goes in it, it's no longer really water anymore. Okay, that's how they explain it. Yeah, I think this is what this falls under. Anyways, these kind of things they don't become tahir. You can't make it tahir. Okay, so one example would be something like um soap maybe. Like, if soap, some kind of soap, by the time I don't know. They gave this example. So the book that I'm following that I'm translating and sending you sisters notes of, it has another example of grains. So like I don't know, rice or some kind of food items like that. If they have somehow become najis and the najasa has soaked inside it, then it also says the same thing. You can't make it tahir. Okay? So I think it falls under this example of what I was just trying to say, because that's a discussion I was reading elsewhere that, we have something where when the water reaches inside it, it's not really water anymore. And so you can never make that kind of thing tahir. Okay? Anyways, these are discussions. Maraja have gone into like these kind of detailed discussion. I don't know how practical it is. If you ever soak your rice in like najasa, then that's it. You have to just throw that rice out. Okay? Okay, if there's no questions, Alhamdulillah, that wraps up the main discussion on water. Water is, like I said, the main example of mutahhir. It is something that can make a lot of things. Most of the things that we would want to make tahir in our life, we would use water for making it tahir. The next item, though, that we wanted to talk about today is that what Sister Hannah was asking us about, and that is the earth. The earth makes the bottom of your feet and the bottom of your shoes tahir with certain conditions. Okay, I'm gonna read it from Ayatollah, from Imam Khomeini, so from the book that we're following, and then I have Ayatollah Sistani's book in front of me as well. So just inshallah bear with me if I'm spending a little bit of time reading, but basically it says the following that so first of all, this is Imam Khomeini's. We'll compare it. There's, I think, a slight difference to Ayatollah Sistani. Imam Khomeini says, if the bottom of your foot or the bottom of your shoe becomes najis when you are walking, okay, because of touching, okay. So first of all, when you're walking, it becomes najis, and then as you continue to walk, because of walking on the ground, that najasa is removed. Then it becomes tahir. Okay, so there's a few different conditions. It kind of explicitly spells it out. This is going to be in the notes that I'll send you. That first of all, we're only talking about earth. Okay, so things like sand and stones and gravel, okay, those work as opposed to things like a carpet or wood or this is kind of like the whole discussion on tayammum. What can we do tayammum on? Exact same discussion. The things that count as earth would work for this. Okay. The other thing is that this earth that you're walking over has to be dry. It can't be wet. Okay. Um, one of the points of controversy here, I think, is that can you just rub your foot on the ground and make it tahir? Not everybody agrees. Okay. So Imam Khomeini is lenient here. He says, yeah, you can just kind of rub your foot, but it's better to walk a certain number of steps. Other marajis say you have to walk. It can be like you have a najis shoe and you just kind of wipe it on sand and it's tahir. No, it has to happen when you're walking. Okay, I'm looking now at Ayatollah Sistani's. Um, yeah, so again, he says that the bottom of your foot and whatever is somehow protected by your foot, like your shoes, your sandals, these kind of things. Uh, yeah. Yeah, so one thing, Ayatollah Sistani is a little bit more picky, I think, about it. He says that the najasa has to have come about from the earth. Okay, it could have been by walking or by just standing on it. So no, even Imam Khomeini, what I had read was when it comes about by walking. So maybe they're similar here. Okay. Anyways, I think the idea is the same generally. It's just this idea that as you're walking, if your foot became najis, then as you continue to walk, then it also becomes tahir. Yeah. Okay. So as far as I remember, one point of controversy was this idea that can you just rub your foot without walking over the ground? And Ayatollah Sistani does not allow that. Okay, look, he says over here, um, بالمسبحة فإنها تطهر باطن القدم بالمسح بها أو المشي عليها. Okay, sorry. Ayatollah Sistani does allow. I think it's Ayatollah Khamenei. Yeah, I have some notes here in my other book that it's Ayatollah Khamenei that says that this only becomes tahir by walking over the earth. Anyways, it's just a subtle point. Generally, the idea is the same between the marajid that if your foot or your shoe becomes najis when you're walking, then it can become tahir again because of the earth, either as you're walking or even just by kind of rubbing it on the earth. Sister Hannah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So if your shoe becomes najis another way, then you cannot make it tahir by walking on the earth, or
Yeah, you have to just wash it then. You don't, this, the whole earth thing just applies in this situation.
okay, so it has to come from when you're walking on earth, not like the example given before of like walking into a bathroom, like that wouldn't count. Like, and then, like, let's say I walk into the bathroom and I know for sure my shoes become najis, like at the bottom, and then I walk outside on the earth, that wouldn't, that wouldn't, make the shoe tahir. I just wanna.
Ayatollah Sistani, I'm reading what he says right here. He says, ويشترط على الأحوة وجوبا كون النجاسة حاصلة من الأرض المتنجسة سواء بالمشي عليها أو بغيره. He says, احتياط wajib, it's a condition that your shoe or your foot had to have become najis based on by the earth in the first place. It was ihtiyat wajib. So if another marja says something else, then we could follow them. But Ayatollah Sistani has this ihtiyat wajib that you have to, um, yeah, you have to
Thank
have, it has to become najis like that. I have Ayatollah Khamenei's thing in front of me as well. If you give me a moment, I should be able to find this. Najasat Zameen. Okay. Look, it's just like Zameen yaki as pakun and the house Zameen pak bashad, Zameen bad hak bashad. Yeah, so here Ayatollah Khamenei says that you have to walk about 10 steps or so. And when he has all these conditions, he says the earth that you're walking on has to be tahir, has to be dry. It has to be, like I was saying, sand or stones or something. And it has to be by walking over it. Yeah. Okay, so the other thing, Sister Hannah, which is important, that your washroom example probably wouldn't apply. It has to be, the najasa has to be there on your foot. Either the ayn najis thing or something mutanajis has to be like stuck to your foot. Yeah, it says exactly that, what I'm reading. And then as you're walking, it's kind of like removed. And then by walking, not only is it removed, but the whole thing becomes tahir. Long story short, this is like a very specific example. I don't think it would be too applicable to us. Okay? So it's like if urine or blood or something like that, or for example, like there was mud that was najis, that thing itself is on your foot. Then as you're walking, even Ayatollah Sistani had something like that as well. Okay? He said, mm, if the ayn najasa was totally removed before you even started walking on the ground, then this doesn't apply. Again, he's saying ihtiyat wajib. Allah. It was probably more confusing for you sisters than clarifying. So, long story short is that this is not a very relevant, applicable thing. Okay, it's just for when you're walking, something najis gets stuck to your foot, then by walking more, you make it tahir. Okay, we still have 10 minutes. I apologize, I was not totally clear on that, but I hope now it's a bit more clear. Inshallah, maybe next week I'll read it again and try to think about it and present it in a better way. But conclusion was what I just said right now. Okay, that this is a very specific thing to when you're walking, you get some najasa on your foot, and then as you keep walking, it becomes tahir. Okay. The next thing is also again a very kind of specific thing. What is it about? It's when you have najasa on certain things that I'll read to you right now. Then if it is outside, okay, it applies to things that are outside. And then it's wet, so you remove the ainun najasa and you kind of just like throw water on it, for example. Okay, let's say some blood falls on the roof of your house. In the eastern part of the world, you can go on the roof of your house and walk around on the roof and maybe like, like spend an afternoon on your roof. You don't do that in Canada, but something else, let's say on the wall of your house. You just remove the najasa and you kind of throw some water on it, and when the sun dries it, it becomes totally tahir. So you don't need to worry about the rules of like washing it and removing the ghusala and these things. It's just simply by the shining of the sun, it becomes tahir. Okay. So again, the conditions though for that to happen, I'm looking at the book of Imam Khomeini that we're using. It says the following, that first of all, this only applies to land, buildings, and trees and fruits. Okay, so there's kind of three categories. One is land, the floor outside. One is buildings and anything that is part of a building, like the wall or the window, the door. And then the third one is trees and fruits. Okay, as long as the fruits have not like been plucked, they're still on the tree. These three categories of things can be made tahir by the sun. Okay, right here, Ayatollah Sistani has a difference though. She's very clear. Yeah. He says according to it's ihtiyat wajib though, so even Ayatollah Sistani followers could follow other maraja, but he says the trees thing is not ihtiyat wajib, he doesn't have it. And even in the building, he goes into like some specific details, like the I don't know, the door or the window. It's not like really part of it's not the building, it's just like a window. He doesn't count that either. It's ihtiyat wajib, so we can just kind of go with what I initially said, that the land, the ground, anything that's part of a building, as well as trees and fruits on the tree. Okay. And then it's basically what I just told you, that you need to remove the ainun najasa, or if it's like urine, then urine just by drying up. So let's say you're on the roof of your house and a baby urinates. Okay, when the urine has dried, it's like there's nothing there anymore. So just kind of by throwing some water on it and then letting the sun directly dry it, it becomes tahir. There's some conditions, but basically that's it. The conditions are that like there has to not be a barrier. It has to be the sun directly shining on that thing. It can't be like, I don't know, there's a window or a curtain or something in the middle, and then the sun is kind of shining through that curtain onto the. No, if the sun is directly beaming on that thing, it would make it tahir. Yeah. Okay, and only the sun. It can't be something that like, you live in such a hot country that even though the sun was maybe like setting on the other side, it was just the heat of the air that kind of dried it. No, it has to be something that you would say the sun shined on it and it dried because of the sun. Any questions? Does that make sense? These are very brief, very specific things, not that applicable. I was telling you guys, I have a 3-year-old son. We were potty training, and this happened to us. Where in Iran, on the roof of our house, he made things najis. I was telling my wife this is going to be like the first time I've ever implemented these ahkam where we're going to make it tahir using the sun. I see a hand up and a question. Would you have to pour the water or is just this? No, the whole idea, Sister Hannah, is that it has to become dry with the sun. So you need to put some water on it and then let the sun dry it. Mm, okay. Sister Masuma, you have a question? Uh, about not having to double check if an item or food a Muslim is giving you is tahir. Is there a distinction of how practicing they have to be? Sister Masuma, allow me to get back to you. I think we have some istifta'at that may say something. Okay, this one I should be able to get back to you guys next week. Okay, so I'm going to write this down and get back to you. Um, it may be like a ihtiyat thing that it's good if you know the person is an unreligious person. It may be somehow mentioned that it's good to kind of be careful. But overall, generally, the Imams and the Ahkam, the Sharia, even the Imams, they were telling the Shia to not worry about these things. Even at the time of the Imams, there was not all the meat in the bazaar was properly done, the biha of. But they told Shias that it's okay, like you go to the Muslim bazaar, you can eat the meat from Muslims, from Sunnis. You might not trust them, their ahkam might be different from ours as well. It's fine. We can eat their meat. But I think we may have something in the question and answers of the Maraja website that say, okay, if they're like, really sinful, then it's better to do your research and double check. Inshallah, I'll try to get back to you next week on this. Okay, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask. We have a few minutes left. I could go into one more. The next thing is called istihala. So very briefly, we could talk about istihala and then we could end with that. Unless anybody else has any other questions. Okay, the idea behind istihala is that the whole essence of what you're talking about has changed. Okay, it's almost like a bit of a philosophical discussion here that what is the reality of this thing? If the reality of it has totally changed, it's been burnt, for example, totally burnt into ashes. Okay, if that kind of chemical change, the reality of it changes, they give examples of, I don't know, a dead corpse becoming part of the earth, or a seed, a najis seed growing into a tree, or something being burnt, as I just mentioned. These are examples where the whole reality of the thing has totally changed, and therefore, if it was najis before, the new reality of it is not going to be najis. And that's called istihala. This is as opposed to, for example, just grinding something. If you had najis wheat and you ground it into flour, that flour is going to be najis as well. Okay. Sometimes included, like in the book that, inshallah, the notes that I'll be sending you, within this discussion of istihala, there is a discussion of alcohol changing into vinegar. Ayatollah Sistani, other Maraja, they seem to give this a totally different title altogether. As opposed to istihala, this is called inqilab. Okay, inqilab, the changing of alcohol into vinegar. And that is going to make the vinegar tahir. So there's one of the ways of making vinegar is somehow doing something to alcohol. Again, it's like the reality in our book, that the notes I'm sending you, because it's an example of how the reality of that alcohol has totally changed to vinegar, and therefore it makes it tahir. Okay. I see a question, I think. Can we use public barbecues where the grill has been burnt? Sister Fatima, that's a good question. If you're sure that like everything that was najis that was there that was najis has been burnt, then definitely you can use it. Yeah. Even if you're not sure, like it's a matter of najasa and tahara here that you're worried about, right? So no, actually, in this situation, you would have certainty that it was najis in the past, right? So now you need to somehow become confident that it has become tahir. And yeah, if everything najis burnt on it, then it would become tahir. Okay. Okay, sisters, inshallah, we'll leave it at that. And inshallah, we can wrap this whole discussion of tahara and the whole class of ahkam of ours. We can wrap it up next week, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali tahirin. If there's any other questions, please feel free to go ahead. Yes, Sister Maryam.
I just had a question about like disbelievers and the issue of najasa. So I work as an ultrasound technologist, and sometimes the gel that's on the patient gets makes contact with my wrist and
Mm.
like my clothing. So assuming that like these people are not Muslim, does that mean like, that area of my clothing is like najis?
Um, Gel would be a kind of moisture, I guess, right? That's then kind of
It
flowing
does
or
get wet. Like it's almost kind of like water, right? It's not that thick.
so it seems to me that if you want to go with this common opinion that, kuffar are najis, then yeah, you would have an issue. But as I mentioned in the past, first of all, the normal opinion is that Christians and Jews are tahir, and so living in a country like Canada, you can probably assume a lot of people are Christian. You can definitely. So with najasa tahara, you need to be sure that it's become najis. Right? Like your shirt was tahir before, unless you're really confident that it's now become najis, you don't need to worry about it. So either because you don't know the religion of the person, they could be Christian, or the other option is then to follow Ayatollah Makarim Shirazi or somebody else who says that all human beings are tahir.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Also, you had mentioned like a scenario where like a disbeliever makes some dessert or something. I forgot what you guys said about that. I wasn't really listening, but then
Totally same example. It was to do with like you go to a Hindu's house and they've made dessert for you. Okay? So I was saying that, if it's like a homemade dessert, I think it's very likely that they would have touched it. If you have, if you, okay, so it goes back to the idea of tahara and najasa. So either if there's like a chance that they didn't make it najis, let's say they could have been using gloves. You know the person, maybe they might use gloves, or maybe it's just, there is a good chance they didn't touch it, then you can assume it's tahir and you can eat it. Otherwise, if you're confident they had to touch it, then you would have to be following Ayatollah Nasr Makarim Shirazi or somebody. If you want to follow the normal ruling, then no, you can't eat that food.
okay.
Okay. Yes, Sister Hannah?
So sorry to keep you. I have a question that's not very related to this. Is it okay if I quickly
Yeah,
ask?
yeah. No problem.
So, I just it's more of a hijab question when it comes to, so I'm a nursing student, so I have placements in the hospital, and there are times where, like, because I'm obviously wearing long sleeves, but sometimes I feel like there are situations where I may need to roll it up, not all the way, but just a little bit. Is there any exceptions to that part of hijab where, like, a little bit of exposing of the wrist or something when you're dealing with situations that might not be very clean, and you don't want to dirty your clothes either? I'm wondering, in that situation when you're working, like just in that necessary part where you're dealing with patients and you just need to have a little bit of that room. So I was just wondering.
Let me get back to you about that one as well. So you're sure that non-mahrams are around, basically?
Yeah, let's say the patient is not mahram. You're wearing gloves. Like, I'll be wearing gloves, but I'm also wearing long sleeves under my scrubs, where there are times where I feel like if I don't roll it up, like just very little, not a lot, but just slightly. I'm sorry. I know it's a very vague question, but
Yeah.
where I just roll it up enough just so that it doesn't even go halfway up, like just a couple
Mm,
inches of my wrist are showing.
Allah.
So I was just wondering, like, if that's problematic.
Let me get back to you about that, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. No problem.
Thank you so much.
Fi aman Allah.